Hello everybody, thank you so much for joining me back on my channel, Hierarchy of Reads. Today I'm here for the final book haul of 2018, and this book haul is particularly exciting because it is all nonfiction. And not only is it all nonfiction, it's all nonfiction that I was very excited to purchase. In this haul, I have a couple of books that were a little bit more pricey than I felt comfortable spending, but I had made a deal with myself that if I was still interested in reading them by the end of the year, I would get them, and I still was. So yes, so I'll just go ahead and get into all of the books that I purchased recently. So the first book that I want to share is Limbo by Dan Fox. I wanted to read Limbo after hearing about it on Eric Carl Anderson's channel, and of course it is an essay all about the experience of limbo. And I've already read this book and I did enjoy it, although going into it I thought it was going to be something very different from what it actually was. So the first half of the book I was kind of reading it and kind of annoyed that it wasn't what I wanted it to be, but once I got over it and realized it for what it was, I was able to enjoy the second half. I think I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars, and although I would recommend it to some people, I don't think it is for everybody's taste. The second book that I got was Mishima, a biography by John Nathan. I wanted to pick up this book because earlier in the year, Monse over at Monse's Manifesto so kindly gifted me a book by Mishima called Forbidden Colors, and I had no idea what that book was. I had never heard of it before, so I looked into the author and I found the author to be incredibly interesting. And so I wanted to pick up a book about his life, and I'm very excited to read this. The third book that I picked up is actually also a biography, which is kind of strange because I don't usually read biographies, but this one is Manhood by Terry Crews, and I picked this one up for 2 reasons. One, because I really just am fond of Terry Crews. I think he's funny, I think he's goofy. I really liked him in the Old Spice commercials, and now I've been watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and I just think he's hilarious. But I also wanted to pick this up because I've heard here and there, if I'm not mistaken, that he has talked a little bit about his experiences with toxic masculinity. He's also from Flint, Michigan, and I'm from Michigan, not Flint, but either way, there's some kind of camaraderie there that I feel. I've actually started reading this. I'm only 25 pages in, and it's enjoyable so far. It is fun because as I'm reading this book, I hear everything in his voice, and that's very entertaining. So yes, I hope to enjoy the rest of this. The next book that I picked up was In Pursuit of Politics, Education and Revolution in 18th Century France by Adrienne O'Connor. And I actually picked this book up mostly in support of Dr. O'Connor. Dr. O'Connor was a professor of mine during my undergraduate degree, and he's probably one of the best professors I've ever had. He was very engaging and he had very high demands, and I just respect the bejesus out of him. And during that course, he shared with us examples from his papers. And although, to be frank, I wasn't the most interested in the topics he was writing about, I was also able to recognize that I could learn a lot from his writing skills and apply them in my own field. So I purchased this book in support of him. I also purchased it in support of my future career, I suppose, in being able to integrate what I learned from his writing into my own. Plus, I'm interested in pretty much anything, so I'm also hoping that even though I'm not initially attracted to this topic, perhaps while reading it, I'll find myself interested in it. The next book that I have here is Dead Girls, Essays on Surviving an American Obsession by Alice Bolin. And I was so kindly sent this by Miriam. I actually don't really know much about this collection, and I kind of want to go into it that way, so I haven't really looked too much into it, but I am excited about this. The next book that I picked up was The Color of Law, A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America by Richard Rothstein. I know this book talks about the way the American government imposed racial segregation, but I'm not entirely sure the specific arguments that Richard Rothstein is going to be making here, but I know that I am interested in the history and more systematic ways in which racial segregation was really imposed, and so I'm very much looking forward to getting to this one. We only have 3 more, so we're almost done. The next book that I picked up was a collection of poems called Eye Level by Jenny. I haven't looked up how to say her name, and I really don't want to mispronounce it. But I wanted to read this after I saw one of her poems on, I think it was the Kenyon Review, and I've since read this. And though I did enjoy this collection, I think a lot of it went over my head, so I think this is a collection that I'll be coming back to. The next two books are the books that I am most excited for. They were also the most expensive, but the first one is A Natural History of Human Morality by Michael Tomasello. I know literally nothing about this other than the title, but the title is enough for me to be extremely fascinating. Human morality is something that I'm extremely interested in, and knowing that this comes from a psychological perspective is basically all I need to know for me to know that I want to read this, and so I got this one. And the final book that I have to haul today is probably the book that I'm most excited about, but also most nervous about, because it is Why Torture Doesn't Work, The Neuroscience of Interrogation by Shane O'Mara. And I'm hoping this glossy cover doesn't blind you or look super strange, because the cover is an interesting cover. But I'm excited about this because I think the topic of torture and interrogation practices is extremely important, especially given that we have a president who seems to think that torture might be fine to use if it's, in a matter of national security. But from the research I'm familiar with, torture isn't even a valid way to get information from people, at least not reliable information. And so this book is all about the neuroscience behind torture and how it affects the minds. And I'm excited about this because it's extremely interesting. I am a little bit nervous about the neuroscience part, mainly because although I am familiar with the basics of neuroscience, my knowledge isn't extremely profound. And so I'm hoping that this doesn't all go over my head. But either way, even if it's way too complex for me, I'm going to kind of dig in and do my own side research if I have to, because I think that this is going to be a very interesting book. So those are all of the books that I have for the end of the year haul. I recognize that I have very kind of unique taste to what I usually see on YouTube. However, if you've read any of these books, please let me know what you thought. If you're interested in any of these, please let me know. Or if you have books that are kind of closely related to any of these topics, I would love to hear your recommendations. That is all I have for you today, but I look forward to seeing you in my next video, and until then, be well.